Hello everybody, my name is Tanner Kyler, and today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite plants, the saguaro. So this is one of my favorite plants in my collection. This plant is around 20 years old. The saguaro is also known as Carnegie gigantea. Has the specific epithet of gigantea because they are one of the largest cactus on earth, the second largest cactus behind the false saguaros or the cardons, which live in Mexico. So these are native to Mexico, Arizona, and parts of California in the Sonoran Desert, which is the warmest desert of the American Southwest and of the United States. This is a very adaptable plant to different conditions. It is not the most cold hardy, but we'll get into that later on in the video. They grow from an elevation of around sea level all the way up to 4,000 feet. So if you live in an area that's above 4,000 feet elevation, they might be a little bit trickier to keep alive, but they should be fine as long as they are brought in the winter and are given plenty of sun throughout the summer. So water requirements for this plant. The water requirements are a little bit subjective depending on what type of soil medium it has and also how large your cactus is. So when they're younger, they do need a little bit more water. This one here hasn't had water since October. It is now February, so it's made it, 4 or 5 months since it's had its last drink of water, and it's doing just fine. Now it is smaller now than when I brought it in, and it hasn't really grown this winter, but they really don't in the wild. So in the winter, they normally just kind of go dormant and live off the reserves till the spring time where they can get a little bit more to drink. So here in Oklahoma, it gets kind of cold relatively, especially for this plant, and so I have to bring it in, like I said, in October to keep it alive. So this cactus can survive down to around 23 degrees Fahrenheit if there isn't much moisture in the soil. If there's too much moisture, it won't be able to push the water out into the soil and down to its roots and compress itself to protect itself from the cold. So if it has wet soil, it can probably only survive down to close to freezing. These things get absolutely giant in the wild. They can get up to 50 feet tall, and actually they can get taller than that, but on average they get around 50 feet tall and can weigh up to 6 tons. That is the weight of 2 cars or 2 large SUVs. So they get very large in the wild, and so if you're growing this in captivity, you either want a greenhouse for it, be able to put it in the ground if you live in an area that is suitable for this cactus, which would be in the areas of the Southwest if you live in the United States. Predominantly, possibly in Florida, if somehow you can give it really well draining soils and keep it from getting too much water. That leads me to my next point is the biggest thing with this plant to keep it nice and healthy is to not water it too much. So this soil and this has a top dress of some volcanic pumice stone. It also is made up of sand and perlite and some potting mix that has been added in about a third of each to help with the drainage of this cactus. So whenever I water it, within only a few seconds, water will be pouring out the bottom of it. This is so it doesn't get root rot. Root rot is the most common problem people have with growing cactus. Cactus don't like too much water because where they've evolved and adapted, the conditions there can go 2 years without rain or water. And so what they do is they soak up a ton of water as fast as they can whenever rain or water is present. And if you're watering it too much, the plant will keep soaking up and it doesn't know when to quit, and it'll actually kill itself from getting too much water. If you water it too much when it's really hot, maybe it'll be a little bit more forgiving because it can evaporate that water out and grow with it. But if the temperatures are cool, like in the winter time, and you're watering it, it will die. In the summer, you can water it up to once every 10 days or so, as long as it's getting plenty of sun and it's warm and it can grow that water off. But like I said, when it gets cold, you can't do that. So you have to be a bit more careful with how much you're watering it. So this hasn't been watered all winter, so if you live in an area where it's cold winters and you need to bring them into a dark or cool room or an area where they're not getting much sunlight, just don't water them unless they're very small and they need a little bit of water throughout the winter. Like I have some seedlings growing that are only around this tall, and I've watered them a few times throughout the winter, but they have a grow light on them and a heat mat, so they kind of think it's still the growing season. So something that people love about the saguaro, and part of the reason why it's the icon of the American Southwest, is the picture above me. They're large arms. As you can see, this one hasn't got it yet. This one's about 15 to 20 years old, and won't get it for another 30 years or so, because they actually don't get their first arms till they're around 50, sometimes up to 100 years old before they grow their first arm. That is because they are very long-lived plants. They can live up to 200 years. Some can even live up close to 300 years old. So if you want to get it with arms, you need to get it when you're very young and grow it up. If you water it more throughout the summer and give it a lot of sunlight, it'll grow quicker, so you'll have better odds of getting to see of an arm, but you need to make sure you're potting it up or it won't get much larger than what its root system can handle. So this will keep growing, and it actually might be able to get 4 or 5 feet tall in this pot, but it's going to grow slower once the pot, once it outgrows its pot. So you need to make sure you're out potting it if you want it to grow quick and to get those arms, and if you want to have it bloom. Now, speaking of its blooms, if you're wanting to collect seed from it one day, you need to make sure that you either hand pollinate it, or there are some kinds of bees, or you're in an area with the bats that use these cactus as food. Saguaros are actually predominantly pollinated by bats in the wild, and if you are in an area where those bats live, you'll need to either hand pollinate them or have an insect pollinate them, and you'll actually need to have another saguaro with it in order to get the seed from it. So it can be a bit of a tricky process unless you have the right setup. So one of the other reasons it's able to go so long without water is due to its spines. So not only do these spines offer protection, where it'll make me bleed if I touch it actually, and there's also a little bit of a toxin on them, so whenever you get stabbed by one, it'll irritate your skin for 30 minutes to an hour. I've definitely had that happen with this one and with multiple other cactus. Most cactus have some kind of irritant on the spine if you get stabbed. But one of the other things about their spines is they're actually leaves. So the leaves of the saguaro are their spines, and they've adapted to have these small cylindrical leaves that are sharp to keep predators away, but also thin like this so they don't evaporate too much water out and lose much water. So that's one of the reasons why they're able to retain water so well, is in the wild, there's no one there to water them, and it can go 2 years without water because its needles are actually the leaves. And so if it was a large leaf deciduous, a broadleaf deciduous tree leaf, it would have a lot of surface area to evaporate from. So this tremendously reduces the surface area of the leaf, keeping it from evaporating out too much water. I believe I did mention that these basically can survive anywhere whenever it comes to heat, other than maybe Death Valley, California. As long as it doesn't get really over 120 degrees Fahrenheit, you should be fine from the desert, or not even the desert, but just the heat of the summer. So if you live in an area like here in Oklahoma, it got 115 degrees last summer, and that actually was a little bit rough on the cactus, but they were able to tough through it because in the deserts of Arizona, it can get that hot too. Well, I think that's about it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please give me a like or a subscribe and leave a comment to let me know what you liked about this video, what you didn't like about this video, and what maybe you would like to see into the future. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you guys.